All right, thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to do a panel now on specifically about the Normal Is It Real film. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves first. And what I'd like to panelists is if you could sum up your impression or your feeling of the film in one word. So an introduction of who you are, why you're here, and then that one word you. And I'll start.
Okay, I'm Katie Cowdery, and I am a teacher at the Odyssey School and also director of Outreach. We are a school for students with dyslexia and other language-based learning differences in Baltimore County. I am starting my 14th year there, and I've taught for over 2 decades in also public and parochial and private, sort of the gamut. Also children's schoolhouse in California. Peace Corps volunteer, etc. And I'm also neurodiverse myself. I have dyscalculia, which is math learning difference. I also have 3 kids, and 2 of them are neurodiverse learners. So I get a front row seat. I would say my impression was, I wish I could do a phrase, but that's okay. I'll just use the word nonlinear.
I'm Karen Leggett. I'm the mother of an adult with learning differences, and I chair the Montgomery County Transition Work Group and Advocacy Organization for young adults with intellectual disabilities and autism. I think my one word actually for the film is hopeful.
Hi everyone, my name is Alida Anderson. I'm a professor in the School of Education here at American University. And I teach in the area of special education in our learning disabilities program. I've been here since 2009. I've worked over the years in schools, preschool classrooms with children with language-based and language-based learning disabilities, as well as other challenges. I've studied language, cognition, and art therapy approaches over my years of working with young children and also school-age children with language-based learning challenges and their families. In my work at AU, I teach master's degree students who are working to be learning disability specialists through internships at our partner schools like Lab School, as well as other area schools that support all students with learning differences. The one word that I would use is emancipating, and I say this because the students, all of our students having examples and role models of how different is the new normal, that is empowering and even more so emancipating from the marginalization that so many of our students and ourselves have experienced in the learning setting. And I think in school careers, all the way through university. And I think when people who re-experience these early traumas in their day-to-day lives see these stories, these cases, I think it's extremely emancipating.
Hello, my name is Joshua Seven. I was at AU and my third one inspired. Yes, I was a Brendan camper for about 3-4 years, and okay, so basically, I was diagnosed with ADHD at a very young age, and one way I describe this film inspiring, I could kind of relate and not relate to a lot of these people, but I think this one thing in general was that all of them kind of had something to say, and people had a student representation. I think that's kind of the way it works for everyone at university.
All right, so and these questions are just for anyone who wants to chime in. One of the big themes was how each of the youth, each of the people in the movie as a youth struggled. Do you have an example of struggle that you personally experienced or that you saw others experience? We'll start with that, and then we'll kind of flow into what we can do as a society, parents, friends, family, to try and alleviate that struggle. A person struggles, or
I guess I could start. So as a kid, I had depression a lot of the time. I wasn't like fully heavily, but as you know, growing up, I basically just had like trouble with talking to people and really just trying to interact and make friends. I'd say, as a society, I think one thing is just giving kids, more opportunity to talk. I think that's like one thing, a lot of kids with disabilities, people always see them as different, just give people the sense of bullying them. And, I think that that's not always the case. I think that people with trauma, there's a lot of people, obviously, probably have maybe young kids, other people just looking at their thinking about why it's so different, just people making false assumptions that, being quiet, growing up. And I think that, we can really just get to the base of that, some people are just different. People have stuff.
Okay.
So I would say I absolutely struggled, and one of the struggles was that I didn't really understand how common, other people have struggles too, and I didn't have the language that I think, I look at my students at a school that supports them so well, that they have the language very young to describe what they're feeling, experiencing. We train them to be self-advocates from the start. Again, we're a K through 8, and they had such a 1-up or 5-up or whatever, compared to my, what I had. And the irony too is that I was not a poor student. I was actually a really great student, but I was in silent pain, honestly, working so much harder. And a lot of people didn't realize that. On top of it, I want to add, part of that silent pain and challenge was there was all this background stuff going on that compounded my learning difference. I was a fatherless kid. We had definitely a lot of challenges, just with my mom having to be the only parent, and I got accepted into a really great school, but that also meant I stood out. I didn't have the money that some of the kids had. There's just all these differences that for me was this big, messy snowball of anxiety, and having a learning difference was just part of that, but so now I think, wow, it's just so wonderful the way we have more language, we have more tools, and we're teaching kids in some arenas, like the lab school, like Odyssey, mindfulness, and just ways to express this. And art therapy is such a great tool. Sports, lots of things, sailing, right? So I can absolutely relate.
I would say one thing, and a lot of people have mentioned the word anxiety, and we're talking a lot in society generally about anxiety. Sometimes it can be anxiety over everyday things that some of us may not experience. I know my daughter does. We found a t-shirt the other day that said, "I have option anxiety." And that really described whenever she's presented with too many choices, whether it's on a menu, whether it's on where to go on a particular day, she can dissolve today. And she's very aware of that. She laughed when she saw this option anxiety. Said, "Yes, that's what I have." So I think that's even very young. I wish we had started younger with her and helping her deal with getting anxious about menu choices. Something that's not really important, recognizing that these are not life-changing decisions. You can choose anything on the menu and you'll be around tomorrow. But helping her realize that, more ways to help kids realize how they can deal with minor issues that cause great anxiety.
Yeah, so just piggyback that, I'm so glad you brought that up, because in this effort to be open-ended, sometimes teaching assignments for kids will be these really open, make a project of your own, draw whatever you like, and we may not realize that actually that's causing anxiety for certain kids. I can tell you that as a parent. My son, when he was 5, the kindergarten teacher would just be so open-ended. It was lovely on the one hand, but I suggested to her just gently, if you don't mind, saying you could do whatever you like, or here are 2 suggestions, because my son would just stare at the page, just feeling overwhelmed, like I don't even know where to start. So I think that's a great point, and it's a lot more common than I think a lot of people realize, even though again the intentions are good.
So, so the finding accommodations and finding ways to overcome the struggles, can you share an experience of you going and finding your own accommodations, or how can we as a society help provide accommodations? So what,
So, in American University, that's people ASAC, I forget what the full thing is, so basically it allows anyone to get accommodations to write, papers and just write that thing. It was pretty easy for me to get, relatively, I went to school for high school, for particular learning disabilities. And I'd say it was a little less, kind of more, a little less organized than what I had in high school. I think that's just because I had work tests, I had to be a student just kind of being say, hey, just this test, and basically I had a reading accommodation. And I think they trained me pretty well here, I actually kind of passed here. But outside of that, I mean, in school, like, AU, is, I think there's really a gap. I'm just lucky that we're like that money, but I know a lot of people, particularly friends, and it's my last thing who had trouble getting this exactly an accommodation I get to enjoy, because, they can't pay, to have an ADHD test, and they can't pay to do, all these like things, and they require all this paperwork and bureaucracy, and I think that honestly, it just makes it so hard because, even something that I've noticed ADHD or dyslexia, basically, like, all of it is just gonna be more, it's gonna be more hard than, focus in class and, really, pay attention, which is always a problem for me. So I think just really expanding accommodations because I've seen how it,
I'd like to follow up on what Jonathan's talking about, because I think that the root of that is advocacy. Especially for families and students who don't necessarily know their way around a system to be able to know what's available under the law for accommodations under Americans with Disabilities Act and for IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And we see these massive equity differences starting in early childhood across so many communities where students' families simply don't have access. And I think that comes to the root of teacher training. We have to empower our educators to be primary advocates for children and families. And it reminds me of like what Ladera Korn was saying when he said, the learning difference is not the problem, it was self-esteem and how the system really was created this, there were systems of inaccess and marginalization and disenfranchisement that with accommodations, we can open this up. I also think accommodations are as much the educator's responsibility as they are the students to ask for them, meaning that even in the university setting, the onus should be on us as professors to make our assignments more universally designed, to make it so that it does level the playing field across students with and without exceptionality, so that we can transform the dichotomy and create accessibility for everybody. And I think an example of that would be, varying the types of assessments that we use, multiple ways of assessing. So it's not just simply one type, one way of answering a question that requires a verbal response. Another way would be using untimed or open book exams so that people can utilize and analyze and synthesize without being put on the spot to sort of show what you know and direct. And I think that those kinds of paradigm shifts in education can really move us to move accommodations forward in big ways. So thank you for starting that off.
I think those are great points, and we could really think about assessment as really what is the point of it? It's to get someone prepared and be able to comprehend and share that comprehension, and people do that in different ways. So shouldn't our assessments have a little more flexibility and creativity to them? I loved your example of your daughter's quilt. I think, that is brilliant and it's creative. And so giving some choice and some flexibility with how teachers assess is really important. I think about myself with the fact that math made a lot of sense to me, being able to use manipulatives and drawings. And I love the fact that at the Odyssey School, we encourage that all the way through up 8th grade. You know, we don't have to stop using those after they're, you know, just little kids using, you know, your fingers and all that. And if you look at the research, Joe Bowler, growth mindset, math work and all that, you know, that's actually, it really supports higher level thinking skills. And it's not watering it down. It's just making it more accommodating. It's offering scaffolds.
I have to do that, but like sometimes when I was like professors, especially doing journalism, you won't always have the expertise of how to do it, disabilities. I'd say one example I would make, but like one of the professors just, I could just tell like he couldn't get it, he just didn't understand, and I guess I can't blame her, you know, but I do wish that the school and the system more would have a way to help those teachers because there's one thing to get to, you know, like there's just no organization that puts that. Yeah, exactly. You know, it's definitely just a good way of how we think of accommodations. There needs to be more of this from the administration level, you know, and we spend all this money on other parts of the school, you know, and you can't give more funding and just helping kids get what they need because I feel like there's just the boundary as well, you know.
Well, and we talked about, when we talked earlier about the club for kids with hearing differences and, is the club sort of promote self-advocacy?
Yeah, so like they promote a lot of self-advocacy, I'd say, the club itself, I don't know how the funding works, I'm only just a member, I don't like, I'm not a board or anything, but I, one of my best friends was told me for a long time that, you know, they always had struggles in school, they always told events on how to do more, you know, things to help self-advocacy, but they also just, you know, general events, help students just get acclimated to the environment, but I mean, there is a lot of advocacy from students on campus, but you know, I do feel with, you know, the university itself has to move their way to all students are, it's just an imbalance, you know.
So one of the, you know, I think the thing that pulled at my heartstrings in the movie was seeing the individuals discover something that they were successful at, and that sort of pulled them up. Can you share with us, how you found your own passion for success or saw that in one of your students? And then, follow up to that is, you know, what can we do to try and help you find that passion? Because there is less early struggle and more successes early.
Okay, so mine was writing, I kind of found out when I was growing up that I was a really good writer, and I think to the point is, you know, just writing down things and being able to understand that, you know, really personally, more use of vernacular, I think helps. And for friends, I've always, you know, just seen them, you know, different trainings, you know, like creative thoughts and you know, just most of the videos, they really help, you know, people grow up, you know, grow their personas and all of that. And
how can we help kids find that sooner or younger?
I honestly just think integrating it, but I think that a lot of parents will get back. Sometimes I can just tell you my parents did. A lot of the times that they help me back, sometimes I don't think that's a good thing. Well, it's back, you know. It really just harms the kids. It's like another thing, you know, parents think, oh, you know, I only need to think about it, thoroughly just want to provide them with enough at the same space so that they can feel better. But in my experience, only gets back to it and help. I mean, I can tell you when mine did, it really just made me not feel great. And you know, I think that if there's anything kids have to learn, they have to do it. You know, activities, whatever, you know, whatever they want to do.
I think, I mean, that was one of my questions, and I don't know quite how a school can help with this, but I think in many cases, in the film, you had many very supportive parents who really recognized that their kids had abilities and skills, and yet their kids were very frustrated. So I don't know whether we have, how we encourage both the parents and also the schools to increase the range of opportunities so that kids experience absolutely everything from sailing to the circus to the theater to tennis, whatever it is, so that if they don't like it, get out of it. But if they like it, then you pursue it and just expose them to as much as possible as early as
I would credit my parents for this. They did, like, again, a lot of trips that I was like, they always took me to Europe and other, you know, Caribbean islands. And I think that really I think that helped me see more of the world. And, you know, this, like, because I have sensory issues, right? So basically, I guess like going to louder events helps. And I think just, you know, as I grew up more, I could tolerate more. But I think as a kid, really, you just have to go to an event. It's going to be painful, but the only way you're really going to get used to it is if you just keep exposed to stuff. Yeah.
We had talked a little bit in our prep about bullying, and, one of the questions was, you know, what are schools doing now? We've got cyberbullying, we've got other kinds of bullying, so, thoughts on what schools or families can do, to try and prevent bullying or address it?
So we have, as I mentioned, character education woven through our entire school. So the curriculum of, you know, kindness, honesty, respect, and hard work, those 4 pillars is so part of the sports field and the language class, tutoring, and lunchroom, and recess, you know, which is sometimes where the bullying kind of stuff happens more. It's like those sort of in-between times. And I'm not saying that nothing bad ever happens at our school, but I would say it's pretty pale, partly because it is so infused that this is a good thing to be. And we are looking, we just, we look at ways of just making that, as you said, I'm sorry, I forget your name, but the ecosystem, it's like the culture, it's like literally everything about us, so that when something is unkind, it's more of an, instead of sort of this punishment with the kids, of more of having a discussion, conversation, like, was that kind? Does that really honor the 4 pillars? So we have officially, we've always had this, I mean, since the school's been going for, as I said, 30 years now, but we've found that from pandemic on, we're finding kids are having a little bit more trouble with some things we used to be just a given at our school, which is like how to sit in a circle, how to like not touch somebody too much, things like that, that we just didn't have to deal with as much, partly because, well, people were together and then they weren't, and then they didn't learn those skills. So we have adopted restorative circles, and it's the idea of actually coming in circles, building community and talking, and sometimes leaning into challenging discussions, but it's actually built on kind of Native American talking stick and learning certain kind of ground rules. And I would say it's working very well. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect, but you're creating a culture where bullying, being mean, othering, and all that just is not cool. So you never don't do it.
Use the term othering, and I had written that down earlier.
Yeah.
Sort of describe, it's, so even if you're not bullying someone, if they're other than you, can you describe it a little bit?
Well, it's like sometimes these little microaggressions of things that people are talking about that sort of sets somebody else apart. It could be from what they wear, or where they did or didn't vacation, and they're so, you know, or and how they learn, how they act. And it's quite powerful, the words we use and how kids might organize themselves at recess, and who they include and who they don't. So that is something that we're really sensitive to now, too, with Odyssey School being a private school, where we are, you know, it's tuition, right? And it's unfortunately who can pay, who can't. And as we have more and more kids who are on full ride scholarships and so forth, we have to be much more sensitive to this. So we are also leaning into socioeconomic status kind of training. And so this, it's quite pertinent. I know we're talking about learning differences, but still it's a way that somebody else might be different, right? And we want to include. So you need to actually create sometimes scenarios where students are modeling, like it sounds like it's fiction or it's something from a story, but it's just a way to model and see, like, enact, oh, you know what? Gosh, that person was kept on the outside and people didn't even realize it. And then that can be a model for then talking about how we need to be as our own community. Pretty powerful, and it's a practice, you know, it's not something that's a quick fix, but I feel like it's a nice model that would be good to integrate in other schools.
I think it's also related to the previous question asked about strategies. There's been, you know, there's quite a few approaches to build community to honor identity, to celebrate, ethnic, racial, linguistic, disability, identity, diversity. And I think our schools can use these approaches, to build equity in the classroom so that then, there is, the notion of othering is directly addressed, and there's a shift in this paradigm of like the insider and outsider. And I just wanted to sort of mention the idea of the arts and ways to, at lab school, they called it the academic club approach, where the academic subject is taught within the context of an arts approach. And the membership within the classroom is all contextualized, meaning it's within a space and time, a period, and there are dramatic enactments and ways that each of the people in the classroom has a role and is part of the community, and the classroom has established norms. And so I think, that's one example, and especially for kids who have experienced marginalization and trauma from previous settings, they really need to rebuild these experiences and frankly, the bullying that has ensued in their careers. I think if we can create more of these experiences and help teachers create these experiences through arts and through integrated approaches, the strategies are within those kinds of settings, because you can offer ways to have kids interacting and show what they know, so there isn't a premium on, say, spoken language or verbal expression or memorizing facts and sitting quietly in your seat and raising your hand.
I'll mention a couple of examples that I thought was sort of expert. I raised that question. On social media, I saw one time schools that have a kindness bench. And you have a lot of different names, but it's sort of one bench on the playground. And if you're feeling bullied, if you're feeling in need of something, if you're feeling anxious, you go sit on that bench. And other kids in the school know what that bench is for, and likely somebody will come over and sit next to you or talk to you or help you or have lunch with you. And it's a nice way to reach out. I don't really have personal experience with how it works, but it sounds like a good idea. The other one is one that's local. There's an organization called the Giving Square, which was started by a woman in Bethesda. And she works now with a couple dozen elementary schools teaching philanthropy to 3rd and 4th graders. And first they learn about the big word philanthropy and how to pronounce it. They also learn that philanthropy can be helping out your neighbor, helping the next person in the class, developing empathy, both for people in your own world, but also and beyond. And these kids choose charities in the community that are helping children, and then choose a charity to donate to. But along with that, they're learning empathy and caring for each other. So I think that's an excellent model that schools, I was looking for new schools to participate, but even on a smaller scale, that's an excellent program that can address some of these issues.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say, that, Odyssey, I know Lab, I know lots of schools, including the one I was mentioning earlier, Raritan Town School in Kenya. They did some work with, last summer, are highly art-based. One thing I think is really important to realize about it is it's not about trying to make kids all artists. It's about using art as a mechanism for learning. And we were sitting out there, you said it better than I am, but I mean, it's a process, it's working through, problem solving, trial and error, and emotional regulation. There's so many great things that come out of it. So, it's just important to keep that in mind. If some people are kind of like, well, you're not trying to make everybody artists, or you don't have to be good at drawing or this, that, and the other. But, it's kind of neat. The school in Kenya, they're weaving baskets, they're making these beautiful beaded sandals, all these kinds of things, and it's really creative ways to teach things you need to learn in the academics. So it's all very applied, but it is part of that kind of process of kind of emotional regulation.
So the film, I think, I got inspiration from all 4 of the characters or the individuals. I want to ask you all, what inspires you? What do you do to keep yourself inspired? And then, maybe what inspired you within the film?
I think so. I I think, following what you were describing about art, the way we approach life can be art. And, if Project Zero's work on art thinking routines and helping teachers key into some of these ways of thinking about the world and being curious and using multiple means of action, expression, engagement, the concepts of universal design and experiencing things in visual spatial ways and in kinesthetic ways and movement. That's artful, being outside of the box. I think for me, I try to embrace that and look for ways to do that in my own life. And I think I try to show this to my grad students. So in our graduate classes, and it's not just the way that I approach topics, but it's also through the ways that our teachers in training are looking at their own students as individuals and trying, as you say, not trying to make everybody into one thing, but really helping each of those people find their passion, their strength. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about the film is that each person was really celebrating and honing in on their uniqueness and their art, who they are. And so I think that to me is what inspires me.
And so I guess just going forward and just having forward mindset for development, I know that things do get tough, but I think just keeping a linear mindset of, okay, we're gonna do this today, we're gonna do that today, just keeping organized as well. I think organization is a big part of it, just keeping myself, inspired and just, I guess, for how others, I just say, just trying to help people when they need it. Because I do have a lot of friends who are in situations that are worse than mine. And I know that I can't really help people directly, but I do know that I can just give at least some advice to people. So I just kind of try to keep myself organized in life if it helps.
I would say I'm inspired myself by reading and artistic expression in all forms. But I was particularly inspired in the film by all of these young people's ability to finally conquer their own exasperations and find a way to express themselves and be successful with their own skills and the fact that their persistence in reaching out and finally doing that is inspiring.
I stay inspired by spending lots of time in nature and making sure I surround myself by people I find inspiring, actually. It's always no big surprise that I find myself in places like this because it feeds me. And it's a wonderful way to connect and keep yourself a lifelong learner. I want to say, it's interesting. I know with Derek now, so it's really neat. He's done some work at our school, actually. And I think it's neat how, all four of those people, including him, they had that spark and they had those interests and those talents shown early, so yes, they had their struggles, but I can relate to that too, where, it sort of relates back to one of your first questions, like how do we identify that more in schools, but I'm happy to say, with my 3 kids, my teacher questionnaires that come in, ask about that. There's sort of like a little brainstorming. You share about your child and their interests and passions. And sometimes it's just that simple, but how great would it have been with those 4 people if they had more chances along the way to express them and develop them? How great that they got there anyway, and it doesn't have to be that painful. One little quick aside, I have a student who's now just graduated from college that I tutored at Odyssey 9 years ago. She asked to do her final project on on Odyssey and dyslexia, learning differences. It's all about self-advocacy and the power of self-advocacy. So she came up with these lists of questions and asked if she could do a video, and so we did, and it was great. It was really interesting. She interviewed kids, a mix of kids. The kids who had been diagnosed early and come to Odyssey or Odyssey-like school early did not know how to answer some of the questions. And one of them was just like, can you describe their struggles? They were like, it hasn't been a struggle. I'm understood. I'm just matched up with the way I learn, so it's not a struggle. They literally like, what are you talking about? And then the kids that weren't were talking about how they felt ashamed, embarrassed, run to the bathroom during reading time, all the stuff we hear about. So that's pretty powerful. So, it inspires me, and it also it's a lot of food for thought.
Yeah. So we have just a couple minutes. Does anyone from the group have a question for Helen, Derek, and then Jeffrey?
I've got a lot of comments. I think your responses were just spectacular to what I thought was a spectacular film. One thing that struck me from the film that I would like to hear your thoughts about is 2 or 3 instances talked about entrepreneurship and economic development through entrepreneurship. The hairdresser with Eric, others that are entrepreneurs. Can you say a little bit more about how you see entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship playing a role in advancing our community?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of, we're finding more and more young adults trying their own businesses, even young adults with Down syndrome. Like the tote bag I'm carrying today is Shred Support, and these are 2 young men in their late 20s with Down syndrome, and during the pandemic they lost the jobs they had, and they've now started a business, a shredding business. And they do it in one of their garages, and they have help for some of the financial things from their parents. But it's a successful business, functioning business. And a lot of them, we have some other young people who made and sold jewelry and started their own businesses. So I think there are increasing numbers who are finding, it's often with support from a parent, but the parents sort of recede in the background as they may help it get started, but then the young people, as they gain confidence, do this. So I think entrepreneurship is something we should be investigating and exploring and providing funds for and grants for, and really encouraging that young people.
I agree, and their research shows that people with learning differences, there's a disproportionate amount of them that are entrepreneurs. That's great, but one thing to think about that though is that successful entrepreneurship often needs seeds of money, and not everybody has that, right, to get started. And so that's just one equation. So I do know sometimes, now that I've been doing this as long as we have, people talking about it not being successful and actually adding to the frustration of still navigating their learning difference. So we need more support with that, but we also I think a big push, and I'm really happy to see in Europe, happening in places like Ireland and the UK, is neurodiverse workplaces that just embrace difference and are just, so that, there's just all different types offering to community. Because one thing that sometimes is the flip side of entrepreneurship is that it's not always getting the chance to work in a community. You might just be working for yourself and one other person, and you might thrive out of a little bit more community. Not always, I'm just saying. I mean, was David Flink, right? Is an example of, entrepreneurship, and that's grown, and it's a incredible organization that supports neurodiverse people across our country. So it's wonderful. I'm just saying it's not for everybody, and I think that the other piece of this is really training people on neurodiverse workplaces.
Yeah, well, that kind of tied in, and I don't even know what my question is. It's sort of, you had talked about this interesting fact of those who have been identified very early, and so they were just on a normal path, right? As far as they were concerned, this is just the norm. Others had this struggle and then were coming out, and I'm just wondering, take an Odyssey or lab, our daughter's at one of the labs in Baltimore, but preparing them for going back, those who have not faced the struggle, so to speak, in that traditional setting, preparing them for the fact that they may face
Yes.
some of that struggle and how we do more of that, because they won't always be surrounded, you know, until we
How do you
we
build that
permeate
resilience
that
in
through all of
advance?
society, yeah.
Well, we did definitely build that in, and that is why, as I was saying earlier, we only go to 8th grade. So, I mean, we are spending our entire time that they're there at Odyssey, teaching them self-advocacy skills and preparing the fact that a lot of people are not gonna get you. You know, it's one of the reasons I redid the book too, it's just like, yeah, it's to have that understanding that, I don't like the word neurotypical, but whatever, just a lot of people don't get it. But they don't have to go through like the painful struggle. I know there's like you know, there's struggle is sort of a arbitrary term, because there's like a point of struggle that's actually part of learning, but I just mean that like the shameful part that we're talking about, people having the trauma that we're talking about in there. Not sure, like, we don't need that.
Well, and I think, just to follow up, I think there's a really important role for education to play in explicitly teaching self-advocacy and self-awareness. It doesn't have to wait, you know, till the kid is by law eligible for transition, right? I mean, which is 13, right? Starting transition planning. We should start empowering children as early childhood to start becoming aware of their assets, their challenges, how to articulate that in developmentally appropriate ways. That it doesn't have to become this, okay, you reach 8th grade and oh my God, you have to deal with the outside world, because I think that is, I think the notion of acceptance, of self-acceptance and celebrating our uniquenesses, is really lifelong.
Yes.
Right, and so the earlier we can help adults, help children do that, and also families, to help families, you know, I think about those families and so many families need a lot of support, especially in the early years, to help navigate not only the systems and the resources, but also their own experiences. Connecting families with other families who have been through things is enormously powerful to help with advocacy building and the feeling of acceptance, so that then it doesn't have to be this, you know, shock. And I think that kind of goes to your question ultimately.
All right, well, that is the time we have. We're gonna go back into our speaker sessions, but we do have a reception from 4 to 5. So if there was a panelist that sparked a thought or interest, or just the movie in general, we'll have some more time this afternoon to chat about it. We're gonna take a 5-minute break now, and then we're gonna come back with Dr. Kaufman. So thanks, everybody. Thank you.